Hello and welcome to episode 521 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, as always, joined by Evan Silva. We are down to the final four of the NFL playoffs. Eagles 49ers, and then Bengals Chiefs coming up Sunday for all of the marbles. Evan, how was your divisional round?
Oh, not the greatest. I mean, a lot of the games didn't necessarily go the way that I anticipated. I was just all in on, the narrative stuff for the Bills. I even got my Damar Hamlin shirt and everything, and I was just, this is a team of destiny, and that just wound up not being the case. We'll talk about that when we get to the Bills Bengals recap.
Yes. On today's show, we are going to go team by team through each remaining squad, talk about everything we saw in the divisional round, what it means going forward. Before we get into it here, have a couple notes to get to. With NFL winding down, if you are into the NBA, props, NBA, DFS, we have you covered. Dink and Gallagher and the NBA team are grinding their cocks to zero, absolute stone cold zero, literally every day, and then doing it all over again the next day. Just an incredible amount of information, projection work, everything to cover each day in the NBA. They can help you in a big way. Also note, this podcast is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They continue to run these battle royales, in other words, snake drafts just for this weekend. So you can do snake drafts just for divisional round. They have tournament style. Snake draft just for conference championship round. We do have rankings up on the site for that. You can upload them and draft your little hearts out. If you have not tried Underdog Fantasy yet, promo code ETR when you sign up, they will match your first deposit up to $100. Again, promo code ETR at underdogfantasy.com. All right, Evan, let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles home game against the Giants here. They came out absolutely dominant, very well rested team off the bye. Talk going into the game was how healthy was Jalen Hurts' shoulder. I think he answered that quickly with a nice, perfect throw to Devontae Smith early in the game. They were up 14-0 in the first quarter. They were up 28-0 at half, turned into a bit of a laugher. And again, I thought Jalen Hurts looked really healthy. Lane Johnson was back, and the pass rush was absolutely dominant. What did you think overall of the Eagles game against the Giants?
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles were just, and we knew this, that the Eagles were just so much more talented than were the Giants. Giants had a great season. I think that Brian Daboll, to a greater extent than any coach in the NFL, earned that Coach of the Year award, and I think he's going to get that. But that's a regular season award, and this team was never cut out to do anything more than win one playoff game. I think it was an excellent accomplishment for them that they even won one. And going here to Philadelphia, they were not competitive. That was not surprising. The Eagles did whatever they wanted to in this game.
Yeah. I will say about the running back stuff. So I played Miles Sanders a bunch in tournaments, and the way that it went bad for Miles is kind of the way you're scared it goes bad. They're dominant. However, he got vultured by Boston Scott for one touchdown, and then Kenny Gainwell comes in for the clock killing stuff, and Kenny Gainwell ends up ripping off and having a huge slate breaking game just because the game was so out of hand. In the first half, the opportunities at the running back position for the Eagles were Miles Sanders 13, Kenny Gainwell 5, Boston Scott 2. And I think that that's kind of what we can project going forward. Kenny Gainwell, obviously dude can play. But that opportunity, if the game was closer, I think would have gone to Miles down the stretch. One thing I wanted to get your take on is the Devontae Smith versus AJ Brown debate. I feel like we've lightly been having it all year. I've been jokingly talking a lot about Devontae Smith, saying how, man, do not forget about this guy. I know the AJ Brown stuff is awesome. Devontae Smith is awesome in his own right. Over the last 17 games that the Eagles have played, Devontae Smith has out-targeted AJ Brown 142 to 136. Let me say that again. If you just exclude week one, all the games since week one, Devontae Smith has out-targeted AJ Brown. Now, AJ Brown has a higher average depth of target, and he's had more fantasy points. But man, Devontae Smith is a baller. I'm curious, Evan, what you think, real life, and then also in fantasy, about this Devontae Smith versus AJ Brown debate that's going on.
I think that AJ Brown in this particular game got banged up during the game, and they just really didn't need him. I think there was some speculation that maybe he was pissed about not getting targets or something like that. No, he was frustrated because they were making smart decisions and not putting him back in the game when they didn't need him. Jalen Hurts only wound up throwing for 154 yards in this game, 16 completions. So there wasn't a ton of pass game production to go around. And then with A.J. Brown on the sideline in this game, Devontae Smith wound up having a big game. Dallas Goedert had a pretty big game. Over the last, Devontae Smith to start this season was very up and down, frustratingly up and down, but he has not been up and down or inconsistent by any means. For the last 2+ months, he's been one of the best receivers in the league.
Yeah.
I don't know if are we trying to create a debate like, oh my God, Devontae Smith is better than A.J. Brown right now. You remember, you even go back to Tennessee, A.J. Brown was never an extreme volume receiver. He makes a lot of plays downfield. He does a lot of stuff after the catch. In this particular game, he wasn't healthy.
I think the debate is more the parallelization thing. Like we talked about it a bunch when the Seahawks had both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett cooking and stuff like that. I get paralyzed. I'm like, God, I don't know which one to pick. I like them both so much, and then I end up playing neither, which obviously is not the case on 4-game slates and 2-game slates, but in full slates sometimes that would happen. And I think it's just an uncomfortable thing when they're so close. I do think that they're really, really close. I think the national narrative is more that A.J. Brown is a cut above Devontae Smith. I'm just not sure that that's the case. Quick and to put a bow on the Giants stuff. Saquon's a free agent. Daniel Jones is a free agent, and they need wide receiver help badly. And I mean, you could see them franchising Daniel Jones. You could see them going a lot of different ways. Saquon has come out and said, and I know Ron will be all over this, but he came out and said, I think he doesn't need to reset the running back market, something around $12 to $15 million a year, which is a ton for a running back. But there's more complicating factors here beyond just on-field play. Saquon's like the face of the franchise. They're clearly better with him, despite that he's just a running back. And so they have a complicated offseason coming up. The thing that I want to see them do is get wide receivers, man. Like, get some wide receivers. Yeah. They have nothing out there right now. So that's all I'd say about putting a bow on the Giants.
Yeah. There was a report that came out today that the Giants at one point offered Saquon Barkley $12 million a year during the season on a long-term deal. I think that they're going to bring both these guys back. I'll say, and I didn't get a lot right during the divisional round. The matchup analysis did work for Richie James.
Yeah.
He wound up having the volume game. Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton didn't do anything against those stud outside corners for Philadelphia. Those guys are awesome out there.
Giants need wide receiver help so bad. Like, you can't have Richie James featured in the playoffs. Like, you just can't.
Right.
Okay, let's go to the San Francisco game. This San Francisco-Dallas game was not a very pretty game, and maybe we should have expected it with two very good defenses, and these defenses imposed their will for much of the game. On the Dallas side, I mean, Dak was bad to the point where, like, the team's own official Twitter account was, like, kind of taking shots at him the next day, which I thought was weird. But anyways, Dak made two, I think, head-scratching, unnecessary interceptions. They lose Tony Pollard in the game. I mean, Zeke is just a joke after Tony Pollard goes out. What did you see as a whole in this 49ers Cowboys game?
Well, the 49ers have a really, really good defense, and so it was never going to be easy for Dak Prescott. You remember before the season, we were talking about what would be the explanation for, or what could lead to Tony Pollard taking over as the Cowboys lead back over Ezekiel Elliott over the course of the season. And we kind of talked about that. It could be, look at this skill position core. I guess they felt like they had to get rid of Amari Cooper. They had to keep Ezekiel Elliott because of his contract. And they didn't have a lot of explosiveness on offense. CD Lamb is really good. He's like a big power slot receiver. And they needed Tony Pollard's explosiveness. So when he goes out of the game, like, they get a lot of plotters on their offense. I mean, look, Dalton Schultz is a nice big possession receiver. And, they got some other guys who, had decent moments over the course of the season as role players, but they really didn't have any playmaking ability. And Dak did not play well in this particular game. They were playing against one of the best defenses in the league. So they wind up with 12 points. CD has a big game and nobody else really. So, I mean, look, they drafted Jalen Tolbert in the third round. He gave them nothing to the point that they were so desperate. They went searching. They flirted with the possibility of acquiring receivers during the season, late in the season. Wound up picking up T.Y. Hilton like off the street, and he wound up playing a pretty big role for them in very key moments. This team needed. I mean, they really could have used Amari Cooper, and I think that their number one priority for when they enter the offseason, they need to go get another playmaker, maybe two more playmakers, because they just didn't have a lot of explosiveness on offense, and it was glaring when Tony Pollard went out.
Right, exactly. Tony Pollard injury. Maybe I mean I don't think this is the case, but maybe if Tony Pollard stays healthy, they're able to find a way to win this game. We'll never know. I was actually just going through my Offensive Rookie of the Year award portfolio, and I found some Jalen Tolbert 70-1 tickets, and I don't even think the dude ever played. So those were those were dead on arrival. Okay, San Francisco. I mean, not their best game, but a very, very, very difficult matchup. Obviously, the Cowboys defense was playing well. I thought Trent Williams looked healthy. Saw some stuff. Brandon Thorne was tweeting about how good Trent Williams was able to look there on the edge. I thought Christian McCaffrey's situation, from at least a fantasy perspective, the usage was interesting. It seemed like he was battling a bit of a calf issue. And so they were more using CMC in high leverage situations. He was the first read on a bunch of third down plays. He lined up as a wide receiver a bunch. He was the running back at the goal line, but he was out carried by Eli Mitchell 14-10, but he still gets goal line work, gets 8 targets. He's still so valuable in fantasy. It just seemed like maybe the calf thing was a little bit of an issue. Any thoughts there? Any other thoughts on San Francisco as they get set to face the Eagles for the right to go to the Super Bowl?
I continue to be pretty impressed with Brock Purdy. I mean, I think that he gives them a sort of second reaction playmaking element that Jimmy Garoppolo did not. I think Kyle Shanahan came out today, or either today, we're doing this on Tuesday, either today or yesterday, and said they don't expect Jimmy Garoppolo to be back for the NFC Championship game. There was some speculation that he could be a few weeks back. He's not going to – they're going to roll with Brock Purdy, I think, the rest of the way. And I think that he's earned that. And nobody had like a monster box score game here for San Francisco. They controlled this game defensively, benefited from, the issues that we just talked about on Dallas. George Kittle was sensational, though, made some absolute crazy catches, bobbing the ball up in the air to him to make big plays down the seam. But I continue to be really impressed with Brock Purdy. I think everybody should be at this point.
Yeah, I saw some Eagles 1.5s open. I see Eagles 2.5 mostly across the board there ahead of Conference Championship Sunday. Let's go to the AFC. So this Bills-Bengals game was snow-filled, and it seemed to actually affect the Bills more than the Bengals, I thought, or maybe it's just because the Bengals' offense just has so much more talent than the Bills' offense, and it just seemed like everything was easy. They even said it during the broadcast. I forget who was doing the game. They're like, everything is just easier for the Bengals, and quite frankly, they have better players. They have better running backs. They have better wide receivers outside of Steph Diggs, and they're just deeper, and they're just better. And the offensive line stuff, that was such a big story last week. We talked about on Friday, like it had gone mainstream, it had gotten overblown, and it was people were double counting and triple counting. The offensive line stuff just got out of control. Joe Burrow didn't seem to be fazed by it at all. So what do you think as a whole of this Bills-Bengals game?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of things. I mean, I got everything wrong in this game. I mean, from, a prediction standpoint, I just absolutely blew it on from, the Bills being the team of destiny, and to actually the biggest problems up front that occurred during the game was the Bengals defensive line against the Bills offensive line. One thing that we had discussed, the Bills aren't like a dominant team in terms of talent, especially offensively. I thought that became glaring as the season progressed, and it was obviously glaring in this one. Some former players made some good points on Twitter during the game that, so, the Bengals had lost 3 offensive line starters over the final 4 games. The fact that it was snowy out, and it kind of slowed down the pass rush a little bit, allowing just slowing down the Bills pass rushers and giving the Cincinnati offensive line up front like an extra beat. And look, also the Bengals knew that they were shorthanded offensive linemen, and so they can make adjustments. And Joe Burrow, as we also discussed, that Joe Burrow can have big games while being under a lot of pressure. He wound up not being under a lot of pressure in this game. I will be interested to see if the offensive line issues do creep up in the next one against Chris Jones and Frank Clark and the guys that Kansas City can bring. But in this particular game, it wasn't even a factor. But the Bengals pass rush and just the way that they dominated the Bills up front, and the Bills offensive line wasn't great really for the duration of the season, and they were exploited in this one.
Man, I want to get back to the Bengals in a second here, but it's not great for the Bills. Like the Bills championship window, I feel like was, or it's still open certainly, but it was at big time open these last 2 years. They lost that crazy game to the Chiefs last year. Then they lose this game as, a 5 or 6 point favorite to the Bengals. The cap space situation for the Bills, I mean, they don't have a lot of flexibility, especially with Von Miller's cap hit going up, especially with Steph Diggs' cap hit going up. It's going to be tough for them to make a lot of moves here.
They need to draft better. I mean,
Yeah.
they need to. I think that this is another team, kind of like the Cowboys. They need to prioritize offensive help, maybe in the form of another weapon. I think they definitely need to add talent on the O line.
Oh, and they need wide receiver help. I mean, James Cook over a wide receiver is not, does not look good. Let's just say that right now. Okay. The Bengals stuff. The crazy thing is like T. Higgins wasn't very involved. Tyler Boyd was barely involved at all. As we talked about, no three offensive linemen are down. And Joe Burrow still shreds. The debate on all the stupid shows on TV now is like, is Joe Burrow the best quarterback in the league? Blah, blah, blah. Is he better than Josh Allen? Blah, blah, blah. I can see merit for that stuff. I absolutely love Joe Burrow. And dude has absolutely shredded Kansas City in their last
He's
few
in that
meetings.
tier. I mean, he's in that
Yeah.
tier. We could talk about, oh, this guy might be better than this guy. He's in that tier.
Sure. The running back note that I had here, it was only 41-33 in favor of Joe Mixon over Samaje Perine in snaps. Again, 41-33 Mixon in snaps. Perine actually ran more routes, 18-14. But in terms of touches, 23 opportunities, 23 for Mixon, 12 for Perine. But yeah, on that 2-game slate on Sunday, playing Perine, I thought I didn't do it, but it turned out to be sharp because the dude is on the field, 12 opportunities for a guy that no one plays, who plays well in the pass game. I thought that was a good play. Any more thoughts on the Bengals as they get set to play the Chiefs here?
I think we summed it up pretty well. Jamar Chase had a touchdown that was overturned.
Yeah.
He could have had a much bigger game. He was still a huge factor. I mean, they're so good at he didn't get his usual double-digit targets, but he got 8, clearly led the team, and they're really good at just getting the ball in his hands. Hayden Hurst, again, a guy that I did not like in this game, wound up being, one of the best tight end plays on the divisional round slate.
Yeah.
The Bengals they dominated this game, period.
Let's go to the Chiefs. So, unfortunately, the story of the week is injury related. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it is what it is. Patrick Mahomes suffered what is being called a high ankle sprain early in the second quarter against the Jaguars. He misses a series. And during that series, Chad Henne takes the team 98 yards for a touchdown. Then Mahomes comes back in and, he couldn't really move. I mean, he really couldn't. And that's a big part of his game, not necessarily running, which he does well, 20, 30 yards or whatever, but making these crazy plays where he spins away from defenders and extends plays. It's such a huge part of Patrick Mahomes' game. We don't know right now how severe it is. The market assumes right now that's going to be really bad. Bengals have gone out to a 2.5 point favorite now on the road in Arrowhead. And I think that if Mahomes was healthy, this would be more like, I don't know, Chiefs -3 or something like that, or Chiefs -3.5. And so the market is assuming that Mahomes is going to be very, very limited here. I don't know what to think right now. We should have more information by Friday when we do establish the show. But yeah, Evan, what did you think of the Chiefs gutting out a win over the Jaguars?
Well, I think that just to begin with the Patrick Mahomes, he has a history of playing through ankle injuries pretty successfully. I definitely think it's going to have a limiting factor. It's going to be a limiting factor to some extent. But I still think he could play pretty effectively. They've got a really good offensive line. Bengals defensive lineman, and the way that they scheme with Lou Anarumo, who I'm still surprised isn't getting a lot of head coaching buzz. Their defensive coordinator. But I mean, they can make things happen up front. But I mean, the Chiefs, I think, did Brandon Thorne have them as the best offensive line remaining in the playoffs? I think
The Eagles, yeah.
Eagles and then Chiefs second.
Yeah.
Something like that. Pacheco ran really, really well in this game. McKinnon wound up playing a lot, but it's kind of the same story that had been happening for the previous 3 weeks. He's playing a lot, but not getting a ton of touches. Kelsey was obviously unbelievable. I mean, what do you have? 5 catches on the first drive alone. Dude's an absolute beast. And the way that he riffs with Mahomes, that's kind of your way out of it. I think with the Patrick Mahomes, how limited he might be in terms of his mobility. Like Travis Kelce and him riff on the field, and Travis Kelce doesn't even have to run the designed route. Like he knows where Mahomes knows where Travis Kelce is going to be at all times.
It's been so absurd in the playoffs for Travis Kelce. Last 7 playoff games. This is starting in the 2022 playoffs through Saturday. 14-98-2, 10-95-1, 8-96-1, 5-1-0-8-1, 10-133-0, 13-118-2, and 8-1-0-9-1. I mean, he has been so dominant in the playoffs. I'll have a better take on Friday about the Mahomes stuff, but just know that, like, you know, people are like, oh, I once had a high ankle sprain and I couldn't, like, you're not Patrick Mahomes, bro. You're not going to get the injection that he gets. You're not going to get the rehab that he gets. You're not going to get the medicine that he gets. You know, you're not built like Patrick Mahomes. So it's tough for me to have a strong take on it now. I do think the market looks like an overreaction to me right now, but we'll see. A couple other Chiefs thoughts, and I do want to get to Jaguar stuff in a second here. Kadarius Toney was one of the stories of the slate. A lot of people were like, oh, Kadarius Toney, they were saving him for this. He ran 12 routes, which is fewer than Justin Watson, which is way fewer than MVS and Juju, who've been struggling badly. But on those 12 routes that Kadarius Toney ran, he got targeted on 7 of them. 5.36-0 result. He also got a carry for 14 yards. But man, I mean, you can't play this dude ahead of Justin Watson. I mean, MVS is total dust out there. You can't play him ahead of MVS. I don't know exactly what's going on, but like the wish casting of all of a sudden Kadarius Toney running 30 routes in a game, it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Also, Evan mentioned the Pacheco McKinnon stuff. That was 44-24 snaps in favor of Jarek, but 13-11 opportunities in favor of Pacheco. 0 targets for McKinnon was just absolutely brutal.
You know, he was pass blocking his ass off. Game. That was one thing that really stood out. And the announcers did a very good job of highlighting that as well. Announcers don't always highlight that. McKinnon had some awesome pass blocks. With Toney, I mean, it was kind of what I thought it was kind of what we expected. I mean, I was hoping for more than 12 routes, okay? But we knew that he was going to probably be limited in terms of his playing time and continue to be limited in terms of his playing time. When he was out there, he was going to get the ball. It just, you know, he had 5 catches. Yeah. He had, you know, the rushing attempt for 14 yards. He just did not hit any big plays, which is something that he had been kind of doing in his previous opportunity. Just did not pop for him in this one.
It's always going to be a struggle, like for the model and for me in my head personally, to like get our heads around this. Can a guy run 12 routes and also be a good play in DFS? Like, it's possible, especially on a 2-game slate, because his targets per route run is so outrageous. Like when he's on the field, when they're around the goal line, they obviously look to him, you know? So it's kind of an outlier projection that is hard to do. But from a talent perspective, man, like MVS and Juju, like not being able to do it scares me against the Bengals because they have so many guys that can do it, you know? So we'll see. I'm excited for that. Anyways, Jaguar stuff, just to put a bow on their season. Really successful season. You get rid of Urban Meyer, the King Donkey, okay? You bring in Doug Peterson, and you immediately start turning things around. We already talked a ton about Trevor Lawrence having his arrow straight up, gets Calvin Ridley next year. They ended up doing a good deal with Evan Ingram, and Evan Ingram hit. Christian Kirk, people say they overpaid. He ended up hitting. Trevor Lawrence, as I mentioned, is hitting. Like, they're going to be a pretty good team, I think, for a while now. So like nothing but encouragement. And honestly, in this game, if you just broke down this game play by play, I don't think that the Chiefs outplayed the Jaguars by that big of a margin, if they outplayed them at all. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with Mahomes' ankle, but like the Jaguars were not that far behind the Chiefs here in this game. Any final thoughts on the Jaguars to wrap up their season?
Well, you mentioned how they hit on a number of guys. I would say they hit on Travis Etienne as well, although it continues to frustrate his limited passing game role. He had 3 targets. He caught all 3 for 20 yards or something like that. In this one, 3 for 18. I would love for them to try to make that a bigger part of their offense going forward. But I mean, as a runner, he's like pretty exciting. I mean, he's good on interior runs as well. He's not a particularly big guy. You know, he was kind of billed as like a little bit of a gadget player coming out of Clemson. But I mean, this dude can run the ball between the tackles. He's instinctive and he's explosive on those kind of plays.
Yep. Excited for the Jaguars going forward. All right. We will be back on Friday for Establish the Show with Wiggins for subscribers to cover the 2-game slate, the 2-game championship slate. Always a fun one, even if the edge might not be as big as it is on bigger slates, but we'll be back on Friday for that. Also, Establish the Million Thursday. If you're interested in golf, if you're interested in NBA, head to the subscribe page to check out details there. For Evan, for Bruce Luke, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.